I was 12 the first time Vanessa broke something of mine. It was my arm. We were behind the gym, against the cold brick wall. I had said hello to a girl from another class. That was the whole crime. Look at me when I'm talking to you, Vanessa said. Calm. Almost gentle. She always sounded gentle right before it hurt. She took my wrist like she was checking a watch. Then she turned it the wrong way until something inside me snapped, and the world went white. I didn't scream. I remember being proud of that, in the stupid way kids are proud of surviving. She leaned in close, her voice soft against my ear. See? You made me do that, she whispered. Nothing happens to you that you don't ask for. Same rules as always. That was 18 years ago. I told myself I would never stand against that wall again. Then this morning I walked into conference room B and found out the wall had followed me to work. The whole department was already seated when I came in with my coffee. 40 people. Quiet in a way. Mondays are never quiet. New CEO, Dennis murmured, sliding a chair out for me. My oldest friend in this building, and the only one still willing to save me a seat. Board pushed it through over the weekend. Some reformer. Nobody's seen her yet. A reformer, I said. Great. I love a person who fixes things that aren't broken. I set my coffee down. And then, before the door opened, I did one small thing. I took out my phone, tapped the screen twice, and slid it into my pocket with a faint smile. Nobody noticed. There was no reason to notice. A man checking his phone before a meeting is the most boring thing in the world. The door opened at exactly 9. Heels on hard floor, even and unhurried, like a clock that had decided to walk. She wore a gray suit that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked like a decision. And her face hadn't aged so much as sharpened. For 1 second the room tilted. 18 years folded shut like a cheap umbrella. It was her. Good morning, Vanessa said to the room. My name is Vanessa Wolf. As of Saturday, I run this company. Polite nods. A few people sat straighter. They saw a CEO. I saw a girl behind a gym wall, and my forearm remembered a weather it had no business remembering. I don't believe in long introductions, she went on. I believe in standards. People who meet them stay. People who don't, leave. It's very simple. It's the only thing that's ever been simple. Her eyes moved across the table, unhurried, collecting faces. And then they found me, and they stopped. Something flickered there. Not surprise. Recognition. The quiet pleasure of a person who opens a drawer and finds exactly what she expected to find. Adam, she said. Just my name. Like she was tasting it. Vanessa, I said. Flat. Even. The voice I use for the dentist and for bad news. The room felt the temperature change without understanding it. Dennis glanced at me, then at her, doing the math friends do when they smell something they can't name. You two know each other, she said. It wasn't a question. We went to school together, I said. We did, she agreed and smiled. Small world. It is not a small world. She had bought herself a chair at the top of my building. There's nothing small about that. You don't accidentally end up running the company that employs the boy you used to break. That takes intention, and money, and a patience I should have recognized as my own reflection. She moved to the head of the table and set down a thin folder she did not open. The folder was a prop. She didn't need notes. She'd clearly memorized us before she ever walked in. I've reviewed the team structure, she said. I'll be making changes. But first, I want to understand how this department actually works. Day to day, habit by habit. Habit by habit. I filed that away. People who talk about your habits are people who plan to live inside them. Let's start with something small, Vanessa said, and turned her gentle face directly to me. Adam, your phone, please. The room went still in a new way. My phone, I repeated. There's a sync report I want to verify on a real device, she said smoothly. Yours will do. Company policy, going forward. I like to know my systems from the inside. There is no such policy. There was no such report. Everyone in that room knew it, and nobody said it because she was the CEO and it was 9:15 on a Monday. and the rent is real. So this is how she wants to play it, I thought. 18 years and she still opens with the same move. Take the thing. Make him hand it over. Make them watch. I looked at her steady, pleasant face. Then I reached into my pocket, unlocked the screen, and slid the phone across the table. Of course, I said. A small ugly thing happened on her face when I didn't fight. Disappointment, almost. The wall is no fun if the boy just leans on it. She picked up my phone like it was hers. And in front of 40 people, she began to scroll. Dennis stared at the table. A woman 2 seats down pretended to read a memo upside down. The phone was mine, but somehow we were all holding our breath. Let's start over then, Vanessa said, mostly to herself, swiping. Properly this time. She didn't read a single sync report. We both knew there wasn't one. She read my life instead, one screen at a time, and let everyone watch her do it. Lots of contacts, she said lightly. Busy man. I answer emails, I said. It's a gift. A few people almost laughed and caught themselves. Vanessa's eyes lifted to mine for half a second. She did not find it funny. She found it noted. She stopped scrolling. Her thumb hovered. Who's Ella? The room shrank to the size of that one name. My sister, I said. She let the silence sit, just long enough to make it mean something. You should call her more. Family matters. I'll add it to the list, I said. Beside me, a junior analyst named Paul had gone the specific shade of gray people turn when they realize the meeting they're in is not the meeting they were invited to. He stared at his notebook and wrote nothing. This is wildly inappropriate, someone said. Not loudly. A woman down the table, Diane from accounts, had said it almost to herself, the way brave people test the temperature of a room before they commit. Vanessa looked up. Pleasant. Patient. I'm sorry? Diane's courage, having peeked out, climbed back inside. Nothing, she said. Sorry. It's all right, Vanessa said warmly. Transparency makes people uncomfortable at first. They adjust. She returned to my phone. Everyone always adjusts. I watched a brave woman learn, in real time, that defending me was expensive. I'd remember that. I remember everything. It's the one habit Vanessa should have been afraid of, and the one she'd never thought to check. She kept scrolling. I kept my hands flat on the table and my face like a closed door, because the closed door is the only thing she has never been able to break. You should be careful who you keep close, Adam, she said, still scrolling, still soft. People clutter a life. Most of them aren't worth the storage. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Then she stood, my phone still in her hand, and slid the unopened folder under her arm. I'll return this shortly, she told the room. Take 10 minutes. Get yourselves some coffee. I want everyone fresh. And she walked out with my phone, the heels ticking away down the corridor like a clock that had gotten exactly what it came for. Nobody moved for a moment. Then the room exhaled all at once. Adam. Dennis was at my shoulder, voice low. What the hell was that? You just gave her your phone, in front of everyone. She asked nicely, I said. That wasn't nice. That was... He stopped, searching. Man, who is she to you? Good question. The honest answer was a long one, and it started behind a gym wall, and I wasn't going to spend it here. She's the new CEO, I said. You heard her. Standards. Dennis looked at me like he wanted to push, and then decided not to. He's always known exactly when to stop asking. It's one of his talents. I'd find out later it was also his job. I picked up my cold coffee and didn't drink it. Cold coffee, it turns out, is a recurring feature of working under Vanessa. I'd have a lot more of it before this was over, and so would the people who thought they were standing close enough to her to stay warm. Across the glass wall, I could see her in the corridor, my phone glowing in her hand, her thumb moving with the patience of someone deleting things on purpose. Take the phone. Wipe it clean. Hand it back empty, so the boy understands the new arrangement. Same move. Same wall. 18 years, and she'd brought the whole playground to work with her. The thing is, I'd felt this Monday coming for a long time. Not her exactly, but something. And a man who feels weather coming learns to carry an umbrella. That little smile before she opened the door. The two taps on the screen. She just didn't know yet that the boy had grown up into someone who keeps copies. That's the whole difference between 12 and 30 in the end. At 12, all you can do is survive a thing and carry it. At 30, you can survive it, carry it, and quietly write down the date. I watched her thumb work, and I let her work. Wipe it clean, Vanessa. Wipe all of it. Take your 10 minutes. I had taken mine before you ever opened that door. The break lasted exactly 10 minutes because she'd said 10, and Vanessa does not round. People drifted back with fresh cups and careful faces. Nobody talked about what they'd seen. That's the thing about power used in public. It makes witnesses feel like accomplices. You good? Dennis asked, sitting down. He'd brought me a fresh coffee I hadn't asked for. Guilt smells a lot like kindness, early on. It's only later, once you know the bill that's coming, that you learn to tell the two apart by the way a man won't quite meet your eyes while he hands you the cup. Never better, I said. The heels came back down the corridor at 9:27. The door opened. She crossed to me first before she addressed the room, and that order told everyone exactly who this meeting had really been about. She set my phone on the table in front of me. Screen up, unlocked. A small, generous gesture, like returning a borrowed pen. Thank you for your cooperation, she said. Then she leaned down, close, so only I could hear it. Her voice dropped into that soft register I have hated for 18 years. Nothing's changed, kiddo, she murmured. Same rules as always. There it was. The wall. She'd carried it across 2 decades and a hostile board takeover just to lean it against me one more time. Right, I said. She straightened, satisfied, and finally turned to brief the room about quarterly targets, as if she hadn't just reached into my chest and tested whether the old fear still lived there. I picked up my phone while she talked. I scrolled, slow, the way you check a wound to see how deep it goes. Contacts, gone. Not all of them. Just the women. Every female name, surgically removed. My sister, my landlord, Mrs. Harper, my doctor, my dentist. She had deleted my dentist. I sat there in a corporate meeting, being psychologically annexed by my childhood tormentor, and the loudest thought in my head was, that's technically medical harm. I have a root canal scheduled. Vanessa, that is a war crime against my molars. You have to laugh. Quietly. On the inside, where she can't confiscate it. Because here's what she didn't understand, scrolling through my life in front of the team. She thought she was emptying a phone. She was filling a folder. Every name she removed left a timestamp. Every clean little deletion was her signature on a document she didn't know she was writing. Take the phone. Wipe it clean. Hand it back empty. The same 3 moves she'd used on a 12-year-old, except a 12-year-old can't keep records, and a 30-year-old who spent his whole adult life documenting everything absolutely can. Across the table, Dennis's phone buzzed. He flipped it face down fast, but I'd already caught the banner. A message from facilities. Something about an order being confirmed. A new nameplate, engraved for his desk. He hadn't been promoted. Not yet, not officially. But somebody upstairs had already paid to have his name made bigger. I looked at him. He looked at his coffee. And in that 1 second I understood that the seat my oldest friend had saved me this morning came with conditions I hadn't read. Something funny, Adam? Vanessa asked. She'd caught the corner of my mouth before I could file it away. Just glad to be back under good management, I said. Good, she said, and almost smiled. She thought I meant it. That was fine. Let her keep the things she wanted to believe. They'd cost her later. Any questions? Vanessa asked the room, wrapping up. Nobody had questions. People who've just watched a man hand over his phone do not raise their hands. Good, she said. Then we understand each other. Dismissed. The room emptied gratefully. I stayed a moment, my dead phone warm in my hand, and looked out the window at the city going about its ordinary Monday. She thought she'd won the morning. By her math, she had. She'd taken something in public, and the boy had let her. But she'd handed it back full of evidence and called it discipline. She'd reopened a war she thought she'd finished, on company servers, with company witnesses, on the record. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I slid the phone into my pocket, exactly the way I had before she walked in, and let out a slow breath. Okay, I thought. Let's start over. The audit notice landed in everyone's inbox on Tuesday. Routine review of internal controls. Routine. The most expensive word in any office. By Wednesday, there was a stranger in the small glass room at the end of the floor, and a sign-up sheet for voluntary interviews that everyone understood were not voluntary. Her name was Kate. External. She wore no company badge, no company colors, nothing that could be confiscated. She had a laptop, a legal pad, and the warmth of a tax form. Sit, she said, when my slot came up. Not please, just sit. I liked her immediately. Adam, I said, sitting. I know who you are. I've read the org chart. She didn't look up. This is a controls review. I ask. You answer. I write it down. Don't perform for me. I can't be charmed and I bill by the hour. Understood, I said. Anti-charm, my specialty. She started with the dull ones. How long in the role? Who I reported to? Whether I'd ever been disciplined. I answered in single sentences and watched her tick boxes. Any conflicts with management? She asked. Define conflict. I'll define the terms in this room, she said without heat. You answer them. Any conflicts with management? None on record, I said. On record. She caught the qualifier. Her pen paused for exactly one beat, then moved on. Good auditors hear the words you put a fence around. Overtime, expense fraud, harassment complaints filed or received? No, and not yet. Not yet. Now she did look up. Interesting tense. I'm an optimist about paperwork, I said. She slid a question across the desk like a card. Have you observed any handling of personal or company data outside of policy since the new CEO joined? There it was, the door, held open by someone who didn't know what was behind it. I didn't make a speech. Speeches are for people without evidence. Instead, I set two things on her desk, side by side, and turned them both to face her. On the left, my phone, as it stood now. On the right, the same phone as it had been at 8:59 on Monday morning, before a single name was touched. That's the contact list this device holds today, I said, tapping the left. That's the contact list it held Monday, 60 seconds before the new CEO took it from my hand in front of the department. I tapped the right. Every name in red is one that was removed during the 10 minutes she had it. Kate went still. Auditors have a specific stillness. The stillness of someone who came expecting paperwork and found a body. All of them are women, she said slowly, reading. My sister, my landlord, my doctor, my dentist. I let that one breathe. I have a root canal scheduled, so I take it personally. She did not smile. She did something better. She pulled the right-hand screen closer and read the timestamps one by one, her lips moving slightly, like a woman counting money that isn't hers. This one. She pointed without touching. Removed at 9:06, and this, 9:08. They're sequential. She was thorough, I said. She was systematic. Kate corrected me the way a surgeon corrects a nurse. Thorough is an accident. Systematic is a decision. Decisions have authors. You have the originals, she said. Not screenshots. Originals. I keep records, I said. It's a boring habit. It's also the only one of mine she never bothered to break. Why would someone delete only the women? Kate asked. She wasn't asking me to guess. She was testing whether I'd reach for a story. You're the investigator, I said. I just keep the files. I find it's healthier not to narrate other people's motives into a recording device. Her mouth almost moved. Almost. Smart. Annoying. But smart. She looked at me then, properly, for the first time. Not at a person. At an exhibit. A clean, dated, beautifully labeled exhibit. You understand, she said, that if these timestamps are genuine, this stops being a controls review. I'd hoped it might. She turned to her laptop and started a new file. I watched her name it, and even upside down I could read the change in the weather. The folder she'd come to fill was the wrong folder. She'd just opened a bigger one. Don't talk to anyone about this, Kate said, already typing. Don't change anything on either device. Don't be clever. Cleverness contaminates evidence. I'll be aggressively boring, I promised. Good. She still didn't look up. Boring is admissible. I have spent my entire life being told I was too quiet, too careful, too much a man who kept receipts. For the first time, someone was treating those exact habits as a qualification instead of a flaw. I could have kissed her audit folder. I left her glass room with my 2 screens and the first decent feeling I'd had all week. She looked at me like I was evidence, not a person. After 18 years of being someone's property, being someone's exhibit felt almost like respect. While I was being boring, 2 floors up, my oldest friend was being recruited. Vanessa's office had a view, a sofa nobody was invited to sit on, and a single chair across from her desk arranged at the exact distance that makes a grown man feel summoned. "Dennis," she said, "thank you for coming. Sit." He sat. On her monitor, angled just enough that he could see it, a mail client was open. He didn't recognize the inbox at first. Then he saw the name on the account and felt his stomach drop one quiet floor. It was Adam's. "You and Adam are close," Vanessa said. Not a question. Her questions were never questions. "We started here the same year," Dennis said. "He's a good guy." "I'm sure he is." She scrolled through the open inbox without urgency, reading another man's mail like a weather report. "I'm restructuring the department. I need someone running the team day to day, someone who understands the people in it, their moods, their habits, their climate." There was that word again. Climate, the word managers use when they mean surveillance. "You'd be good at it," she went on. "Title, raise, your name on the door." "I think there's already a nameplate being made, actually. Facilities can be very eager." Dennis thought of the engraving he'd pretended not to order. The one that had felt, on Monday, like a gift he hadn't earned yet. "Adam's been here longer than me," he said, testing the floor. "If anyone's getting the team, I figured—" "Adam is exactly why I'm asking you, and not him." She said it kindly. "Some people are builders, Dennis. Some people are risks. I'm still deciding which one your friend is. You could help me decide fairly. Wouldn't you rather a friend held that pen than a stranger?" It was a beautiful sentence. It turned spying into protection, betrayal into a favor, and put Dennis in charge of a kindness he was nowhere near generous enough to refuse. "Fairly," he repeated, like the word was a handrail. "Fairly," she agreed. She scrolled another inch through Adam's inbox, paused on something, and let a small private smile cross her face. "He emails his sister every Sunday. Did you know that? Same time every week. People are so predictable when they think no one's reading." "What would the role involve exactly?" he asked. His voice did the thing voices do when they already know the answer and want to be lied to anyway. "Alignment," Vanessa said. "I want to know how the team is adjusting to me. Who's struggling? Who's resisting? Especially anyone with history. If someone were quietly building a problem, I'd want to hear it from a friend before it became a crisis." She let the inbox sit open on her screen, plain as a confession, and folded her hands. "I have nothing to hide, Dennis," she said gently. "I just like to know my house. Is that so unreasonable?" It was the most unreasonable thing he had ever heard, dressed in the most reasonable voice he had ever heard say it. That is the entire trick. The monster says the sensible sentence, and you nod, because the alternative is admitting what's actually happening in the room. "No," Dennis heard himself say. "That's not unreasonable." "Good." She smiled and turned her monitor away, the breach complete and unremarked. "Welcome to management." Dennis stood. He did not feel like a traitor. That was the strange part, the part he would not understand for weeks. He felt like a professional who had made a mature decision. The word betrayal never once entered the room. Only climate, alignment, house. A whole vocabulary built to make sure no one ever has to hear the true word out loud. He took the long way back to his desk so he could finish the argument with himself, the one where he won. It wasn't spying. It was communication. Adam was his friend, and friends looked out for each other. And if he was the one feeding the boss, then he could shape the story kindly, couldn't he? He could protect Adam by being the one holding the pen. He was basically doing Adam a favor. By the time he reached his floor, he had it arranged so neatly that he could almost have explained it to Adam's face. Almost. There was one small splinter he couldn't smooth, one quiet voice asking why. If this was a favor, he was already planning never to mention it. He drowned the voice the way most people do. He thought about the raise. He thought about the office with the door. He thought about everything except the friend whose name he'd just agreed to put a price on, because that was the one thought the raise couldn't quite cover. He found me by the coffee machine an hour later, wearing the face people wear when they've decided to act natural. "Hey," Dennis said. "Crazy week, right?" "Define crazy," I said. "The audit, the new boss." "Look, I know Monday was rough, the phone thing." He scratched the back of his neck. "But honestly, I think she's just strict, old school. Some people manage by fear, it doesn't mean it's personal. You read too much into stuff, man. You always have." I let the silence do its work. Silence is a confession booth. Leave a man alone in it, and he'll fill it with everything he's trying not to say. "I mean, she's tough, sure," Dennis went on, into the quiet. "But that's the job. You can't take it personally. It's not like she's targeting you, right? It's just management. It's just the climate of, change. Climate." He'd used her word without knowing it was hers. The infection had already started. "You talk to her much?" I asked. Light. The way you ask anything you already know. "Me? No, I mean onboarding stuff. Team logistics." He waved a hand at a whole office of things that weren't the truth. "She wants the department to run smooth, that's all. She actually asked how everyone's doing. Adjusting. That's more than the last guy ever did." "That's thoughtful of her," I said, "caring about how everyone's adjusting." "Right? Exactly." He missed it completely, the hook sitting in the word, and smiled, relieved to have an ally in his own argument. "See? You get it." I got it. I got it the way you get a weather forecast for a storm already breaking the windows. My oldest friend had just told me twice, in corporate dialect, that he'd been asked to watch me, and that he'd said yes, and that he'd already filed it under being a team player. Is he explaining this to me, I wondered, or to himself? Because only one of us in this conversation needs convincing, and it isn't the guy who keeps the receipts. "You might be right," I said. He blinked, thrown by the agreement. He'd braced for a fight he could feel righteous about, and I'd handed him air. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you—" His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and a small, complicated thing happened to his face. He turned the phone over against his palm, fast, the way you cover a card. "Anyway," he said, "I should get back." "Sure," I said. "Hey, Dennis, we're good, right?" It wasn't a real question. I wanted to watch what he did with it. "Course we're good," he said, too fast, too warm. "Why would you even ask that?" "No reason," I said. "Just the climate of change." He laughed because he hadn't heard it, and walked off lighter, sure we'd connected. We had not connected. I'd just taken a reading. He left with his phone face down in his pocket, the message still unread, or read once and never to be spoken aloud. I'd seen the banner long enough to catch one word at the top before he flipped it. A name. Hers. I didn't know yet what the message said. I didn't need to. A man doesn't hide a text from accounts. He hides a text from a friend. He'd be back tomorrow with his real face on, asking how my weekend was, watching how I answered. And I would tell him about my weekend, and watch him watch me, and we would both pretend the seat he'd saved me on Monday hadn't come with a price tag the whole time. The thing about a spy you grew up trusting is that he knows where all your doors are. The thing he forgets is that you know where his are too. And I have always, always kept the receipts. The email arrived Thursday morning, 2 minutes past 8, subject line workspace optimization. Vanessa had learned that the cruelest things in an office always arrive with the friendliest nouns. I read it twice. Effective immediately, my role was being transitioned to a remote arrangement to optimize floor density and collaboration flow. Translation: get out of my building. It was signed by HR, but I knew the author. Optimization is a word a person uses when they want to move you without admitting they want you gone. I forwarded the email exactly once, to a folder that backs itself up, and noticed the audit address sitting quietly in the BCC line. Someone had already looped Kate in. I hadn't done it. Vanessa had by sending a written order during an open investigation. The woman kept handing the auditor exhibits and calling it management. Dennis appeared at my desk 20 minutes later holding 2 coffees, which is how you know a man has bad news and a guilty conscience. "Hey," he said. "So, you saw the email?" "I saw the email." "Look, remote's not a demotion. People kill for remote. No commute, work in your pajamas." He set one of the coffees down by my keyboard, a peace offering with steam coming off it. "It's actually a good deal. It's optimization." "You keep using that word," I said, and started unplugging my monitor. "What word?" "Optimization. It's a good word. It can mean anything. That's why people who fire you love it." I coiled the power cable. "Did she write it or did you?" "What? HR wrote it. It's an HR thing." He said it too quickly. "Why would I write it?" "No reason," I said. "It's what HR called it." He shifted his weight. "I might have, mentioned that you work better with focus. Fewer distractions. I was looking out for you." "You recommended I be moved off the floor," I said. Not an accusation. Just reading the receipt back to him. "I recommended a setup where you'd thrive," Dennis said, reaching for the better sentence. "There's a difference." "There's always a difference," I agreed. "That's the whole problem with words." There it was. He'd recommended my exile and gift-wrapped it as a favor, the same way she'd taught him. The student was learning the dialect fast. "That was thoughtful," I said. I wound the monitor cable into a neat loop. I didn't slam anything. Slamming is for people who've lost. I packed like a man catching an early train to somewhere better. "You're not even mad?" Dennis said. He almost sounded disappointed. People want their betrayals to land. A calm victim makes the knife feel cheap in your hand. "Why would I be mad?" I put my one plant in the box. "You said it yourself. People kill for this." I lifted the box, looked at the desk one last time, and left his coffee exactly where he'd set it. Untouched. Still steaming. It's a small thing, a coffee. But I knew Dennis. I knew he'd come back for the mug later, and find it cold and full, and understand, somewhere under all his good reasons, that I hadn't taken the thing he offered. That I'd seen the price tag on it. I carried my box past 40 desks. Nobody met my eyes except Diane from accounts, who gave me a tiny nod, the kind you give a man going off to a war you were too smart to enlist in. "They'll figure out fast what you do around here," she said quietly as I passed. "Things break when the quiet ones leave." "Let's hope so," I said. I didn't know yet how right she'd be by Friday. And then I was out, on the street, in the actual daylight, breathing air that wasn't hers. That was the part Vanessa never understood about exile. She thought she'd put me in a cage. She'd just put me out of her reach. A cage only works if the warden can still get to the bars. She'd sent me somewhere she couldn't follow, and called it a punishment. And I let her. I went home, set up my laptop on the kitchen table and logged in. Same systems, same access, same everything, minus the gym wall breathing down my neck. From here, she couldn't take my phone in front of anyone. From here, I was just a calm voice and a face on a screen. She should have left me on that floor where she could watch me. Instead, she'd sent me somewhere she couldn't. The system went down on Friday, at 20 minutes to noon, during the busiest hour of the week. I know because my home screen lit up with the kind of alerts that mean a building full of people are all staring at frozen monitors at the same time. 40 desks, one spinning wheel. I made tea and watched it happen from my couch. There's a particular peace in watching a crisis you're not panicking about. The building was on fire, and I was a man at home with a kettle, waiting to be asked very nicely for a glass of water. For 20 minutes, nothing happened, which in an outage is the loudest sound there is. Then my phone rang. IT. Poor Greg, the one good engineer they had left, his voice already climbing. "Adam, hi, sorry to bother you. You're, remote now, I know." He was reading my new status off a screen and hating it. "We've got a total lock on the core platform. Nothing authorizes. I've restarted services, rolled back the deploy, tried the admin override. Nothing." Did the override throw an error, or did it just refuse? It refused, politely, which is worse. Behind him, I could hear the specific noise of a floor full of people not working. Can I put you on the big screen? The CEO's out here, and she wants answers, and I don't have any that aren't your name. Put me up, I said. So there I was, on the giant display at the end of the open space, a man on a couch in a sweater, projected 10 feet tall over the department that had watched me hand over my phone 4 days earlier. Life has a sense of humor, if you give it room. Walk me through it, I said. Greg did. He clicked the thing. The screen threw back two cold words for the whole floor to read: authorization denied. He clicked again. Authorization denied. The core wouldn't move for anyone. Not for IT, not for HR. Not, I noticed, for the new CEO standing right there with her arms crossed. Try my account, Vanessa said. Her voice came thin through Greg's speaker. I'm the chief executive. I have full access. I did, ma'am, Greg said. It said he didn't want to read it to her. So the screen did it for him, the same two words sitting there in front of 40 people. Authorization denied. A title is a wonderful thing. It opens almost every door in a building. It just doesn't open the doors that were locked by someone who built the building, and a CEO is about to learn the difference in public. Whose authorization does it need? Someone asked from the back. Greg hesitated, then said the quiet part into a silent room. It's keyed to the original architect. The whole core is. We need coal. We need coal. My name, said out loud, as a solution, in the building I'd been optimized out of the day before. I want to be clear that I did not gloat. I simply reached over on camera and clicked one button. The screen went green. The platform woke up. The whole floor exhaled at once. 15 years I gave this place. And in the end, she couldn't fire me. She could only fail to switch me off. There's a difference, and the whole department had just watched it spelled out in two cold words on a wall-sized screen. That's the joke I kept to myself. Out loud, I said, "You're back up. Have a good weekend, everyone." But before Greg cut the feed, I caught her. Vanessa, dead center of the floor, looking up at my 10-foot face, her jaw set so tight I could see the muscle work from a camera in my own kitchen. For 1 second, the gentle mask slipped, and what was underneath was not a CEO. It was a girl who just learned that the boy at the wall had built something she couldn't take with both hands. She thought she'd erased me from the building. The building had just told her it couldn't run without me. My phone buzzed 30 seconds after the feed cut. A message from Kate, who apparently never logged off. 3 words. I saw that. I typed back, "Saw what? Routine technical support." The whole floor heard your name keep a company alive while the CEO's login bounced. She wrote, "That's not in any org chart I was given. We should talk about what you actually built here." I set the phone down. The exile was supposed to make me invisible. Instead, it had moved my real value out from under her thumb and put it on a 10-foot screen with witnesses. You can't optimize away the foundations. You can only find out loudly that you're standing on them. 2 floors up, around the same time, Dennis was learning what his new office was really for. It had a door that closed, a window, his name freshly engraved on a plate by the handle. Everything he'd wanted. He sat in the chair and waited to feel like he'd won. The feeling didn't come. Before it could, the door opened without a knock. "Settling in?" Vanessa said. She didn't wait for an answer. She came in, looked around at his small kingdom, and then looked at him in a way that made the back of his neck go cold. It was a familiar look, though he couldn't place it at first. Then he could. It was the way she'd looked at Adam across the conference table on Monday. Ownership. The calm, pleased gaze of a person inspecting a thing that now belonged to them. "You did well," she said. "You're part of the inner circle now, Dennis. That comes with privileges. It also comes with rules." She smiled. "But you understand rules. That's why I chose you." "Right," Dennis said. "Of course. I'll need your reports weekly, more if something develops." She ran one finger along the edge of his new desk, checking it for dust, or for loyalty, or for whatever she checked things for. "People who belong to me don't keep secrets from me. It's a simple arrangement. It's worked for me my whole life. People who belong to me." He heard the phrase land and could not unhear it. He had not been promoted. He had been acquired. "What happened on the floor just now?" he said before he could stop himself. "The system. They needed Adam, even after you— A loose end," she said. The warmth dropped out of her voice so fast it left a chill. "Loose ends get tied. That's what you're for, Dennis. To tell me where the loose ends are before they become loud." She tilted her head. "He talks to you, doesn't he?" "Sometimes," Dennis said. "Then you'll have something to report this week." It wasn't a request. "Tell me what he's planning." "He's always planning. He was planning when he was 12 years old." 12. The number meant nothing to Dennis, and everything to her, and he was too rattled to notice the door she'd left open. "Anything else?" he managed. "No, welcome aboard." And she left, as smoothly as she'd come, the gentle smile never once reaching anything real. Dennis sat alone in the office he'd sold a friend to get. He looked at his own hands on the desk like they belonged to someone he didn't fully trust anymore. He thought about the phrase, "people who belong to me." He thought about the way she'd said Adam's age, 12, like it was a wound she'd given and kept. He thought, for the first time, that he might have signed up for something with no exit door, recommended by a woman who collected people and never, ever returned them. And under all of it, the small new fear. If Adam was a loose end to be tied, then what was Dennis, once he'd reported everything he knew? What's the word for a tool after the job is done? Then he got up, crossed the room, and locked the door from the inside. He told himself it was for privacy. New office, important calls, that was all. But a man who locks a door he's never locked before is a man who started to feel watched, in the one place he was promised would finally be his. The lock clicked. Lock. It was a small, private sound. The first honest thing he'd done all week. And on the other side of that locked door, the building hummed along, quietly, on systems built by the man he'd helped throw out. The boardroom on the top floor is a different animal from the one downstairs. No team, no witnesses to perform for. Just the directors, a long table, and the quiet money that had hired Vanessa in the first place. I wasn't there. I heard most of it later from Kate, who sat in the corner that day with her legal pad and missed nothing. Vanessa ran the room the way she ran everything, smoothly, certainly, in a voice that made disagreement feel like bad manners. She presented her strategy for the next 2 quarters. New structure, tighter margins. A roadmap built, she said, on our proprietary methodology. The slides were clean. The numbers were good. For a while the directors just nodded along, the way well-paid people nod at confident slides. Then an older director near the head of the table set down his pen. "This methodology," he said, "the core product. That's Cole's work, isn't it? His framework. We licensed the whole strategy on the strength of it." "It's the company's framework now," Vanessa said. "We've built considerably on it." "Yes, but he architected it." The director looked around. "Where is he, by the way?" "I expected him in this room. A presentation about his methodology, and the methodology isn't here." And there it was, the pause. Just a beat. Half a second of frozen smile. But in a boardroom, half a second is a confession. These were people who read silences for a living, and they all read the same thing in hers. She did not have a good answer. "Mr. Cole has transitioned to a remote arrangement," Vanessa said. "Workspace optimization." "You optimize the architect of our core product off-site," another director said slowly, "during a quarter where we're betting the roadmap on that product. His access and contribution are uninterrupted." "That's not what I asked." The second director leaned in. He was younger, hungrier, the kind who'd been waiting all meeting for a soft spot to press. "I asked why the person whose name is on this strategy isn't in the room presenting it. We don't license slides. We licensed a brain. Where's the brain?" "The brain reports to me," Vanessa said. "A flash of the real thing, there and gone. I present the company's strategy. He executes." "He executed it before you arrived," the older director said mildly. "The framework predates your contract by years. That's rather the point of buying a company, isn't it? You buy what's already built." A few of the directors exchanged a look. It was the look money makes when it begins to suspect it has misjudged a hire. You could see them recalculating quietly, the way men do when the safe bet starts smelling like the risky one. His access, the older director repeated. He'd clearly heard about Friday. Everyone had. A CEO whose own login bounced while the building chanted another man's name does not get to keep that quiet. We heard the platform lock last week. We heard it took him personally to unlock it, from his couch. The room cooled. Vanessa's certainty was still there, but it had a hairline crack running through it now, and a board can smell a crack the way sharks smell the obvious thing. In the corner, Kate wrote one line on her pad and underlined it twice. "Forgive me," she said, the first time she'd spoken all meeting. The directors turned, mildly surprised the furniture had an opinion. For scope purposes, is the question whether Mr. Cole is being managed, or whether the company actually owns what it's built on? Because those are two very different audits, and I'd rather not do the wrong one. The second, the older director said after a beat. Do the second. Then I'll need every assignment and patent filing touching that methodology, Kate said, already writing. Originals. Dated. She didn't look at Vanessa once. She didn't have to. The temperature of the room had already chosen a side. I want to be clear, the older director said. I'm not questioning your leadership. I'm questioning a single-point dependency on a man you've moved to the edge of the building. Who owns that methodology legally? On paper? The company, Vanessa said. You're certain. I'm certain. Because the licensing committee will want documentation, he went on. Assignment of rights, signed, dated before the acquisition. If it exists, this is a 5-minute formality. If it doesn't, he spread his hands. Then we have built a 2-quarter roadmap on a foundation owned by a man we just moved to his couch. You can see why I'd like to know. It exists, Vanessa said. Show us then, at the next session. I'll have it pulled. It was the wrong answer, and she knew it the moment it left her mouth. You don't pull a document you've already seen. You produce it. Pull means look for, and look for means not sure, and not sure in that room was blood in the water. Then it won't trouble you, the director said, if we ask the auditor already on site to confirm it. Formally, add the intellectual property to the scope. Vanessa's frozen smile held. It was a beautiful piece of acting. But she'd walked into that room to claim a man's work as her own, in front of the only people with the power to check. And instead, she'd handed them a reason to go looking. Of course, she said. I have nothing to hide. Kate, in her corner, wrote that down too. The woman did love to say that sentence. Kate was beginning to collect it like a signature. 2 floors down, Dennis was alone in his office with a different kind of evening. He'd locked the door again. It was becoming a habit, the small click that let him pretend the room was his. Then he sat at his computer and did something he could not have explained to anyone, least of all himself. He opened his sent folder. The reports. The weekly little messages he'd been sending upstairs since the day he took the job. And he printed them. The printer in the corner woke up and began to feed paper, one sheet at a time, with that patient mechanical chatter that fills a quiet room. He stood over it and watched his own words come out warm. He hadn't meant to make it real. On a screen, the reports had felt like nothing. Like notes. Like being helpful. On paper, they had weight. He picked up the first page and read it like a stranger. Adam seems calm, but is clearly documenting things, he'd written. He doesn't trust the new structure. Recommend keeping him off the floor. He'd written that. He'd recommended the exile and then stood at the man's desk pretending it was HR's idea. There it was, in his own words, in a font, on a page he could hold. The next one was worse. He mentioned his sister. He emails her Sundays. Might be worth knowing his outside contacts. He remembered writing it. He'd been at home, a beer going warm beside him, telling himself it was harmless. Everyone has a sister. It wasn't even sensitive. And yet here it was on paper. And on paper it read like exactly what it was. A man selling the private corners of his friend's life, retail, by the week. There were 11 of them. He hadn't realized there were 11 until he counted the pages. 11 small acts of loyalty to a woman who'd told him, to his face, that people belonged to her. 11. And he could not remember choosing to write a single one. Each had just felt like the reasonable next thing. That's how it works. Nobody signs up to be a traitor. You just answer 11 reasonable emails and look up one day to find the word already fits. his outside contacts. He'd handed her the map to a man's family and called it knowing the climate. Reading it now, in the locked quiet, there was no kinder word available. There was only the real one, the one Vanessa's vocabulary had been built to keep out of the room. Spy. He'd become a spy, against the one person in the building who'd ever saved him a seat. He didn't tear the pages up. That's the part that mattered. A man who was done would have shredded them. Dennis squared the stack, evened the edges, opened the bottom drawer of his new desk, and laid them inside. Then he slid the drawer shut. He told himself he was keeping them safe. He didn't ask safe for whom or for what day. He just knew, in the place under all his good reasons, that he might need to be able to prove what he'd done. Or undo it. The drawer clicked closed. Another lock. The man was filling his beautiful new office with things that locked. My phone rang at 9 that night. Private number. I already knew who it was, because some calls have a temperature and this one came in cold. Adam, Vanessa said, soft as anything. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Vanessa. I set down my tea. To what do I owe the privacy? I've been thinking about you. Of course she had. About how we started. It's been a difficult adjustment for you, I know. Change is hard for people like you. You get so attached to how things were. People like you. 18 years, and she still spoke to me from a height, like an adult explaining the rules to a child who'd skinned his knee. I'm adjusting fine, I said. You're not, though. Gentle. Almost tender. That was the part that turned the stomach, the warmth, the genuine affection wrapped around the blade. You're out there on your own, making things difficult, and you don't have to. You've never had to. You just need guidance, Adam. You always have. Someone to set the rules so you don't have to be afraid of getting them wrong. I do all right setting my own. Do you? A small laugh, soft and sad, like I was a child insisting he could cross the street alone. You hand aboard reasons to doubt me, and you think that helps you. It doesn't. It just means they'll watch you closer. The more visible you make yourself, the more you need someone managing how they see you. You're not built to be out in the open, Adam. You never were. You did better when it was just us and the wall. Just us and the wall. She said it like a fond memory. Like the place she'd broken my arm was somewhere we used to picnic. There it was. The dialect. The private language she'd been speaking to me since I was 12. The one where cruelty is care and ownership is love, and the wall is for my own good. Here's the thing she never understood. She thought she was speaking a language only she knew. But I'd spent 15 years studying one subject. Quietly. The way you study a disease that nearly killed you. I knew this dialect better than she did. I could have conjugated it in my sleep. So I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just let her talk, soft and possessive, into a phone, on a recorded line, on the record, the way she always overplayed the moment she felt control slipping. Every word she said was a key she thought fit a lock I'd thrown away years ago. Need, guidance, afraid, easier. The same 6 or 7 words, rotated, the way she'd always done it. Lower the target's confidence, then offer to hold it for them. Make the cage sound like a favor. I'd been hearing this song since before my voice broke. The difference now was that I wasn't 12, and the wall wasn't a wall, it was a phone, and phones remember. Let me take care of you again, she said. Come back to the floor, where I can see you. Doesn't that sound easier? It sounds very familiar, I said. A pause. She heard something in it she didn't like. Good night, Vanessa, I said, and hung up before she could find the next gentle sentence. There's always a next one. That's the thing about her. There is always a softer, worse sentence waiting, and the only defense against it is to stop staying in the room long enough to hear it. I looked at the phone for a moment. She'd called to put me back against the wall. Instead, she'd just recited 18 years of pathology into a device that keeps records, owned by a man whose only real talent is keeping them. I thought about the boardroom I hadn't sat in, and the question that had frozen her smile. Where is Cole? 3 words, and they'd done more damage than any speech I could have given. My absence had asked it for me. Same rules, she liked to say. Fine, I was learning to play by them. I just kept the receipts, and I let her keep talking, and I waited for the day she'd reach for a document that had my name on it and find it had been mine the whole time. Kate called the whole department into the open space on a Tuesday morning. Not the boardroom. The floor. The exact floor where Vanessa had taken my phone 3 weeks earlier. I came back in for it. My first time in the building since the optimization. I took a chair at the very back, by the window, and put my hands in my lap, and did absolutely nothing, which is the hardest and most important thing I know how to do. Walking back in had felt strange. 3 weeks gone, and the building had the nerve to look exactly the same. Greg from IT caught my eye by the lift and gave me a small nod. The loaded kind. Good to see you on the floor instead of the ceiling, he said. The 10-foot screen. He'd never let me forget the 10-foot screen. Don't get used to it, I said. I like my couch. 40-some people filed in and sat down like they'd been called to a funeral and weren't sure whose. Nobody talked. In an office, you can measure fear by the silence, and this silence you could have weighed on a scale. Kate stood at the front with her laptop and her flat, uncharmable voice. No slides, no warmth. Just a woman about to read people the actual rules for once. For those who haven't met me, I'm the external auditor, she said. This is a formal session, recorded under whistleblower protection. I'm going to explain what that means, because I don't think anyone has ever explained it to you, and that itself is interesting. A few people glanced at each other. They were not used to a sentence aimed at the thing they were all afraid of. Protection means this, Kate went on. Nothing said in this room can be used against you by this company. Not your pay, not your title, not your future here. Retaliation against a participant is itself a reportable offense, and I report to the board, not to your CEO. She let that sit. I am the one person in this building she cannot fire. Take a moment with that. And if we say nothing? Someone asked from the side. A small, scared voice testing the exits. Then you say nothing, and nothing happens to you, Kate said. I'm not here to force anyone. I'm here because the board asked a question about how this company is run, and the only people who actually know the answer are sitting in this room. She glanced up. You've all been very careful for a long time. I'm just telling you that the rules you've been careful about aren't the real rules. They never were. You could feel the room take a moment with it. The idea was so foreign, it needed time to land. Somewhere in the company, there was an adult whose paycheck did not depend on Vanessa's mood. I'm going to ask some questions, Kate said. You can answer or not. But understand that silence is also data, and I'm very good at reading it. She opened a fresh document. Let's begin with something simple. Across the room near the front, Dennis sat with his shoulders up around his ears. He kept checking his phone face down on his knee, the way a man checks a wound. He didn't look back at me. He couldn't. I just watched. This wasn't my show. I'd handed Kate one clean exhibit weeks ago and then gotten out of the way. The best traps are the ones where you never have to touch the lever yourself. My first question, Kate said, and the room held its breath. Since the current CEO joined, how many of you have had a personal device, account, or message accessed, searched, or altered without your consent? Silence. The good total silence of 40 people deciding all at once that they did not want to be the first. I knew that silence. I'd lived inside it for 18 years. It's the silence of a room full of people who've each privately decided they're the only one. So it can't be that bad. So better to keep your head down and your hand in your lap. Kate didn't fill it. That was her gift. She just waited, pen ready, letting the quiet do the asking. And then, 3 rows up, a hand went into the air. It was Diane, from accounts. Of course it was. The woman who'd said inappropriate out loud on day 1 and then learned what it cost. Her hand shook a little. She didn't lower it. She read my private messages off my laptop, Diane said, her voice thin and clear. In front of my team. She said it was a spot check. There's no such policy. I checked. Kate wrote it down. Thank you. Anyone else? A pause. And then, 2 seats over, a second hand. My email, a man said. She had IT mirror my inbox. I only found out by accident. A third hand. My phone. The day she started. Same as... He stopped, glanced back at me, and didn't finish. Because he didn't have to. Specifics, please, Kate said, gently relentless. Dates if you have them. A search is a story. I want the dates. Second week of the month, the man said. She took it in the morning stand-up. Said she was verifying device compliance. Gave it back at lunch. My banking app was logged out, and my photos had been opened. Kate wrote, "Thank you. Next." That was the thing that broke the dam, I think. Not courage. Dates. The moment it became clerical, the fear lost its grip. You can be terrified of a tyrant. It is very hard to be terrified of a spreadsheet. Vanessa had built her whole reign on the first feeling. She had never once considered what would happen when someone made it boring. A woman near the printers raised her hand. She made me give her my personal email password. For continuity. I changed it that night, and the next morning she asked me to my face why she couldn't get in. She told me my husband had messaged me during work hours. Someone else said, quieter, angrier. I never told her I was married. She'd read it. And then it wasn't one at a time anymore. Hands went up across the floor. Not dramatically, not with speeches, just quietly, one after another, the way water finds the cracks once the first one opens. 5. 8. A dozen. People who'd each thought they were the only one, discovering in real time that they were a pattern. For the record, Kate said, not looking up from her keyboard, I'm noting 23 raised hands to a question about unauthorized access to personal devices in a department of 41. She typed, that is not a personnel issue. That is a system. 23. She said the number like a diagnosis. And a diagnosis is exactly what it was. For weeks, each of these people had walked around carrying a private symptom, certain they were the only ones sick, too ashamed to mention it. Kate had just told a whole room they had the same illness, and that the illness had a name, and that the name was standing in the doorway. And the people who'd raised their hands looked around at each other, and you could watch the fear turn into something else, something with a spine. They weren't the only one. They had never been the only one. That had been the whole machine, and it had just stopped working. Nobody stood, nobody chanted. It wasn't a rebellion. It was worse than that for her. It was an audit. It was procedure. It was a room full of people calmly raising their hands because for the first time, raising your hand had become safer than keeping it down. I didn't raise mine. I didn't need to. My hand had been raised 3 weeks ago on Kate's desk, with a timestamp. I just sat by the window and watched the thing she'd built come apart along the seams she'd sewn herself. She walked in at the worst possible moment, which is the only moment she ever seemed to walk into lately. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, no doubt to project authority, to remind the room who ran it. And she stopped. Because what she saw was a forest. A floor full of raised hands, her whole department, the loyal, frightened people she'd controlled through fear, all quietly testifying against her to a woman she could not fire. I watched her face. I'll remember it for a long time. The gentle mask was still on, but underneath it something was happening that I had waited 18 years to see. The certainty cracked. The arithmetic she'd run her whole life, fear equals control equals safety, returned an error she couldn't override. Her eyes swept the hands, then found me at the back. I didn't smile. This wasn't a moment for smiling. I just looked back at her. Steady, the way you look at weather that's finally turned. She had built loyalty out of fear, and it had worked beautifully, right up until a person arrived that nobody needed to be afraid of. An auditor doesn't threaten. An auditor just asks. And once the question is safe, every hand she ever forced down comes up at once. One hand in the room stayed down. Dennis, front row. His hand flat and white-knuckled on his knee, pressing down like he could hold it there by force. He had every reason to raise it. She'd read his messages too by now. She'd made him a spy and then surveilled the spy. But Dennis couldn't raise his hand because raising it meant admitting which side he'd been on, and the drawer in his office was full of the reason he couldn't. So he sat there. The one lowered hand in a room full of raised ones, and that lowered hand said more about where he stood than any confession could have. I watched him stare at his own hand, like it had stopped taking orders. He wanted to raise it. I could see the want. She'd surveilled him too. He was a victim by every measure in that room. But a victim who'd been paid to spy on the other victims doesn't get to raise his hand and feel clean. He'd built himself a position, with no honest gesture left in it. That, more than anything that happened that morning, was Dennis's real punishment. Not exposure. Worse. He'd reached the one moment when telling the truth would have cost him nothing, and discovered he no longer had a true thing to tell. Vanessa took it all in for one more second. Then she turned on her heel and walked away from the doorway, heels ticking down the corridor. Fast this time, not like a clock anymore. Like someone leaving a building that was no longer entirely hers. Kate, unbothered, made another note. "Thank you, everyone," she said. "This has been very clarifying." "What happens now?" Diane asked. The whole room leaned toward the answer. "Now I write it down accurately, and the people who pay her read it," Kate said. "That's all an audit is. I don't punish anyone. I just make it impossible to pretend nobody knew." She closed the laptop. "You can go back to work. If anything happens to any of you for being in this room, you have my number. Use it." People filed out slowly, lighter and heavier at once, the way you feel after finally saying a true thing in a room built to prevent it. I gave it a few minutes, then got up and walked out the back way, down the corridor toward the lift. I almost made it. Adam, wait." Dennis, half jogging to catch me, his face the specific gray of a man who has just watched the ground he was standing on become someone else's evidence. "Hey," I said, "that, in there." He was breathing hard, not from the jog. "That was insane. That escalated. That really escalated." His phone was buzzing in his hand. The screen lit up, face up for once, and I could read the name on it plain as a verdict. Vanessa, calling. Calling her spy the instant the floor caved in, because that's what panic does. It reaches for the tool first. He silenced it. Looked at me. Silenced it again, when it started right back up. He's about to tell me he didn't think it would go this far, I thought. They always say it. It's the national anthem of people who helped. I didn't think it would go this far. "Look, I didn't think it would go this far," Dennis said. And there it was. Word for word. I could have mouthed it along with him. "No," I said. You didn't think it would go anywhere. That was the whole point of not thinking about it." He flinched. "That's not... Adam, I was trying to protect you in my own way. I swear. I thought if I was the one talking to her, I could steer it, soften it, hold the pen." I'd heard the speech before in advance, because I knew the dialect too. "I know. You were doing me a favor the whole time." "Don't do that," he said. "Don't make it sound like that." "How should it sound?" "Like a guy who made a mistake. Not like..." He couldn't finish it. The word he was avoiding was the same one he'd avoided in his office over the printed pages. It really is a remarkable word for how hard everyone works to never say it out loud. "Here's the part you should worry about," I said. "I never raised my hand in there. I never said a word against her. You know why?" He shook his head. "Because I didn't have to. 40 people did it for me, and I didn't ask a single one of them. That's what she could never understand, and what you're about to learn the hard way. You don't have to push people who are standing on a ledge. You just have to stop holding them up." The phone buzzed again in his fist. Vanessa. The third time in 90 seconds. "You should get that," I said. "She's going to want to know how bad it is. You're the one who's supposed to tell her." Dennis looked at the ringing phone like it was a live wire, then back at me, caught dead center between the woman he'd betrayed me for and the friend he'd betrayed. Two fires, and his own hand had lit both. "Adam, answer it, Dennis," I said, and walked to the lift. "You don't keep her waiting. You of all people know the rules." The doors closed on the sound of his phone still ringing, and his voice, small, finally picking up. "Vanessa." "Yeah. No, Yeah, I saw." Going down, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 3 weeks. She'd spent a month proving she could make a building afraid of her. And in one quiet morning, a woman with a laptop and no fear had asked a single question, and the whole building had answered with its hands. Same rules, Vanessa. You just never read the part where they protect the witnesses. You only ever wrote the rules. You never once had to live under someone else's. 3 days after 23 hands went up, Vanessa did the most predictable thing a cornered person can do. She tried to build a case. Dennis was the one who had to deliver it. Of course he was. She'd run out of clean hands, so she used the dirty one she already owned. He found me at the temporary desk they'd given me near the window, the one they couldn't quite optimize away now that the auditor was watching. He had a single sheet of paper and a face like a man carrying a letter he'd been told not to read. "Hey," Dennis said. "So, HR needs a signature. It's a performance review." "A performance review," I said. "For the quarter I spent working from my couch because the CEO sent me there. It's routine. You keep handing me routine documents, Dennis. One of these days you're going to hand me a nice one." "Whose idea was the review?" I asked. Lightly, just to watch him hold the door shut. "HR flags people for review. It's a process." "Dennis, it's a process," he said again, but his eyes went to the floor, and that's where the truth was, down there with his shoes. "She told me to write it, okay? She said if I didn't, she'd find someone who would, and then she'd ask why I hadn't. She made it so writing it was the safe option." He swallowed. "You don't know what it's like in those one-on-ones." "I have some idea," I said. "I've been having one-on-ones with her since I was 12. He didn't know what that meant. He filed it next to the other thing she'd said, the age, and again didn't ask, because asking might mean learning something that made all of this worse. He put it on my desk. His hand was shaking, just slightly, the paper trembling at one corner like a leaf that knows the season's changing. I noticed. I notice everything. It's the only talent I've ever had. I picked it up and read it. It was a masterpiece in its way. A failing review. Missed deadlines I'd never been given. Communication deficiencies during a period I'd been forcibly removed from communication. Failure to integrate with team culture, which was almost honest, because the team culture had been fear, and no, I hadn't integrated with that. But it was the writing that gave it away. Every sentence hedged, every accusation wrapped in 3 clauses of corporate padding, so no single person could be blamed for any single claim. "Whoever wrote this was scared," I said, mostly to myself. "You can see it in the grammar." "What?" Dennis said. "The participle phrases. Having reviewed the relevant period, concerns were noted." Concerns were noted. By whom? The sentence won't say. This was written by a man so afraid of both people in this room that he buried himself in the passive voice so neither of us could find him. I looked up. "It's beautiful, honestly. It's the most honest thing you've ever written, Dennis, because every coward's clause in it is true." I read another line aloud just to hear it. "It is felt that the employees' collaboration has been suboptimal. It is felt. Not I feel. Not she feels. It is felt by the room, by the weather, by no one at all." I set it down. "You wrote a confession in the third person and stapled it to my file." "I didn't have a choice," he said. "You keep saying that. You had a choice every single time you sat down to write one of these to her." I watched that land. He went very still. He'd thought I didn't know about the reports. Now he wasn't sure what I knew, which is a worse place to stand than knowing. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. I just read him his own confession off a page he'd hoped I wouldn't look at too closely. And then I did the thing he wasn't ready for. I smiled. A real one. The first genuinely happy I'd felt in weeks. "Got a pen?" I said. "You're going to sign it?" He blinked. "Adam, if you sign this, it goes in your file. It's a step toward firing me. I know. I can read." I held out my hand. Pen. Because here's what Vanessa never understood about documents, the thing she'd spent her whole life not learning. A weapon you forge badly is a weapon you've handed your enemy. She thought she was building a case to end me. She was building a dated, signed, beautifully incriminating record of retaliation against a witness during an active audit, written by her own spy on company letterhead. She wanted my signature on it? Wonderful. I wanted it in the file even more than she did. Dennis gave me a pen. I signed it, slow and neat, and slid it back across the desk. There, I said. Tell HR I cooperated fully. I always cooperate fully. It's in my last review. Oh wait, this is my last review. Well, it says I have communication deficiencies, so I'll let the document speak for me. He took the page back like it might bite him. Why are you smiling? Because you just did me a favor, I said. Again. You should really stop doing me favors, Dennis. They keep ending up in folders. The next morning, Kate summoned me to her glass room, and she was not gentle. I want to be clear that I liked Kate. But the woman who interrogated me that day was not the dry, faintly amused auditor from week 1. This was colder. This was a professional, making absolutely sure she wasn't being played by the convenient victim. Sit, she said. You signed a failing performance review yesterday. I did. Walk me through why a man who claims he's being targeted would sign the document used to target him. Because it's evidence. Convenient, Kate said. Here's my problem with you, Adam. You're tidy. Everything you hand me fits. The timestamps fit, the backup fits, the smile fits. In my experience, when everything fits this well, one of two things is true. Either you're the cleanest victim I've ever audited, or you're the smartest person manufacturing a case I've ever met. I don't yet know which. That's fair, I said. I'm not finished. The review alleges poor performance going back months. What if it's true? What if you've been mediocre for a year, saw a new CEO who didn't like you, and built a beautiful little narrative of persecution to cover it? She leaned in. Prove to me you didn't fabricate this conflict to hide your own failure. Prove the access predates the review's claims. Not your word. Proof. Ask me a real question, I said. You'll get there faster. Fine. Did you ever at any point search, copy, or retain data belonging to other employees? No. Did you encourage anyone to raise their hand in that session? No. I never spoke to one of them about it. Did you know in advance how many would? No, I hoped one might. 23 was a surprise even to me. Why didn't you raise your own hand? Because mine was already on your desk, with a date on it, before any of them knew there was a question to answer. She didn't react. She wrote, Last one, and answer carefully. Do you want her destroyed? I thought about it because she deserved a true answer and not a clean one. No, I said. I want it on the record. There's a difference. If she's destroyed, that's her own document doing it, not me. I'm not here to push her off anything. I'm here so that when she jumps, it's written down who was standing where. So I gave her proof. No speech. I slid a single printout across the desk. That's the access record, I said. Every date the review calls a deficiency, cross-referenced with where I actually was and what I actually touched. The deadlines it says I missed were completed and time-stamped before she ever arrived. The communication failures line up exactly with the days she'd removed my building access. The document accuses me of being absent on the precise days she made me absent. In writing, hers. Kate read it, slowly, twice. She did not smile. She didn't congratulate me. She was better than that. The dates corroborate, she said finally, like it cost her something to be satisfied. Either way, the review is self-defeating. It describes retaliation in the act of attempting it. She slid it into the file. 3 weeks ago, she took your phone. Last week, she banned retaliation in front of 40 witnesses. This week, she retaliated in writing. People who feel safe don't move this fast. She's not running a company anymore. She's running from something, and people who are running make the one mistake the calm ones never do. They move toward the edge faster, certain it's the exit. She glanced at me. You understand I had to push. I'd have trusted you less if you hadn't, I said. An auditor who doesn't push is just a stenographer. You spent a week trying to prove I was lying. That's the only reason I believe you when you say I'm not. Good. She was already typing. Because the scope's wider now than anything she can reach. This isn't her audit to survive anymore. It's the board's. She glanced up just once. Send Dennis in on your way out. I have questions for the man who writes such careful sentences. Dennis went into that glass room a manager and came out something smaller. He didn't know what he'd walked into. Kate gave him the same flat courtesy she gave everyone, asked her dull questions, took her notes. And then, somewhere in the middle, without changing her tone at all, she said it. "I've been reviewing the internal climate reports," Kate said, not looking up. "The weekly summaries. They're quite detailed. Whoever authored them has a real eye for an individual's private habits." Dennis's face did something complicated and terrible. The blood went out of it the way water goes out of a sink, all at once, leaving him gray. "Climate reports," he repeated. Submitted to HR as supporting documentation. For the performance case." Kate turned a page. "You'd be surprised what gets handed to an auditor when people are trying to build a file. They submitted everything, including the source material." She finally looked at him, mild as milk. "Do you have anything to add about the climate reports, Dennis?" He did not. He stood, said something about getting back to his desk, and walked out on legs that didn't feel like his. She hadn't even said his name as the author. She hadn't had to. She just let him understand that the private weekly betrayals he'd typed alone in a locked office were now sitting in an official file with everyone else's evidence. Vanessa had submitted his own emails to build her case against me, and in doing it, she'd handed the auditor a signed map of who her spy had been. She'd burned him. To get at me, she'd thrown her own informant onto the fire and not even paused. Dennis got back to his office, locked the door the way he did now. Then he opened the bottom drawer. The printed emails were still there, 11 pages, squared at the edges, where he'd hidden them weeks ago, telling himself he might need to prove what he'd done. Or undo it. He took out the top page and looked at the bottom of it, where his own name sat, typed and certain. His sign-off. His signature on the thing that had helped take a friend's family, a friend's job, a friend's dignity, one reasonable email at a time. He stared at it for a long time. There was no climate left to hide behind. No alignment, no house, no favor. Just a name. His. On all of it. His phone lit up on the desk. Vanessa. He looked at the name, then at his signature, then at the name again. He answered because he always answered. "Yeah. I need the updated notes on Adam by end of day," she said, brisk, like nothing had happened, like a building full of raised hands was a scheduling inconvenience. Whatever he said to the auditor. "You're close to him. Get it." "Vanessa." His voice came out strange. "The auditor has the reports. The ones I wrote. She has them." A pause on the line. Short. Then, smooth as ever. "Then there's nothing in them to worry about, is there? You were doing your job. We were aligned." A beat. "Unless you've decided you weren't." And there it was, the threat under the warmth. The same blade he'd watched her hold to my throat now resting against his. We were aligned. Translation. If I go down, you go down with me, and I'll make sure of the order. "Right," Dennis said faintly. "Aligned." "Good boy," she said, and hung up. "Good boy." The same two words, more or less, she'd said to me on day one. He sat holding the dead phone and finally understood what I'd understood weeks ago in a conference room. He wasn't part of her inner circle. He was just the newest thing she owned, and she'd throw him to the auditor the same way she'd thrown me to the floor the second it bought her a single day. He didn't close the drawer. He just sat there with it open, looking at the proof of himself, while 2 floors below, the audit that would bury both him and the woman he'd served kept quietly writing itself down. When a cornered person stops being careful, you can hear it in how they give orders. Vanessa had stopped being careful. Dennis could tell, because the door to her office was open, and Vanessa never left a door open. Open doors are for people who've forgotten they have something to hide. He'd come up to drop off a report nobody had asked for anymore. He stopped just outside because she was on speaker with the legal department, and the words coming out of the phone made the hallway go cold. "I want an assignment of rights," she was saying. "Intellectual property. The core methodology transferred to the company, signed by Cole. Backdated to before my tenure if the format allows it." A pause. The lawyer's voice, careful. "Backdating an assignment is... Then date it today and write it so it reads as a confirmation of an existing arrangement," Vanessa said. "He's an employee. Employees assign their work. This is routine." It was not routine. Dennis didn't know much about IP law, but he knew the difference between asking a man to sign something and forcing a man to sign away the one thing that made him untouchable. This wasn't a contract. It was a robbery with a pen. And the timing made it worse. The board was auditing exactly this. She knew that. She'd told the directors herself she had nothing to hide, and now she was on speaker ordering a document drafted to take the very thing they were checking she even owned. It wasn't the move of someone who thought she'd win the audit. It was the move of someone who decided to grab what she could before it closed. There may be a question of consideration, the lawyer said carefully, and of timing. The board has the IP under audit right now. If we move an assignment through during... The board hired me to make decisions, Vanessa cut in. I'm making one. Draft it. Plain language. The undersigned confirms that all rights in the methodology vest in the company. 1 page. Nothing he can claim he didn't understand. Ms. Wolf, I'd advise running this past the audit. I didn't ask for advice. I asked for a document. Her voice didn't rise. It never rose. It just went flat and final, the sound of a door closing. On my desk by noon. And if he won't sign? The lawyer asked. He'll sign, Vanessa said. I'll do it in person, a small meeting. Him, me, a witness for the paperwork. People sign things in small rooms that they'd never sign in big ones. He knows that better than anyone. A pause, softer, almost to herself. He's always understood small rooms. Dennis stood in the hallway and understood fully what was about to happen. She was going to put Adam in a small room and take the last thing he had, the way she'd taken his phone, and his desk and everything else. She'd do it with a gentle voice, and a piece of paper, and the absolute certainty that he'd fold, because he always had. Except Dennis had watched Adam not fold for a month now. He'd watched him sign a phone away, and a review away, and smile both times. And Dennis had finally started to suspect that the smiling meant something he hadn't worked out yet. He stepped back from the door before she saw him. His heart was going hard. And standing there in the corridor for the first time, Dennis wanted to do something honest. He pulled out his phone. He opened it to Adam's name. His thumb hovered over the call button. It would be so simple. 1 call. She's going to ambush you over the patent. Small meeting, a witness, a backdated assignment. Don't sign anything. Get ahead of it. 30 seconds. He still knew Adam's habits. Still knew he'd answer a call from an old friend even now. 30 seconds and he could be, for one moment, the person he'd been before the nameplate. He stared at the screen. Adam's name. The little green button. His thumb didn't move. Because calling meant admitting. Calling meant saying out loud. To the man he'd betrayed, that he'd been standing outside her door. That he'd known. That he'd always known. It meant admitting he'd been her instrument the whole time. Switching sides only now, at the last possible second. Because he'd realized he was going down too. Calling wasn't loyalty. Calling was a man trying to buy back his own conscience at the last minute. Retail, the way he'd sold it. And under that, the colder thing, the thing he hated most in himself. If he warned Adam and Adam won, then Vanessa would know there'd been a leak. And the leak had a name, and the name was on 11 reports in an official file. He was afraid. Not for Adam. For himself. Even now. Even doing the one good thing left. He was doing the math on his own skin. His thumb hovered over the green button for a long, long time. He thought about the morning Adam had started. The same week as him. Both of them nervous in cheap ties. He thought about the seat he'd saved him on the day the wall walked in. The last clean thing he'd done before the nameplate. He thought about the coffee Adam had left untouched on his desk, still and full, and how he'd understood, even then, that he'd already crossed a line he couldn't see the back of. 1 press. That was the whole distance between the man he'd been and the man he could still choose to be. 1 press. He didn't press it. Then he locked the screen and put the phone face down on a passing windowsill, like it had burned him, and walked away from the call he didn't make. Somewhere behind him in her open-doored office, Vanessa was already deciding what to wear to the small room. She always dressed for the meetings she expected to win. It would be the last time that instinct ever served her, and she spent it on a blazer. The unpressed button. The 30 seconds he had, and didn't spend. Of all the things Dennis did and didn't do in those weeks, that was the one he'd think about at 3 in the morning for the rest of his life. Not the reports he wrote. The call he didn't. The reports were a slow drift a man could almost forgive himself for. The unmade call was a single clean choice, and he'd made it against the only person who'd ever saved him a seat. The meeting invite hit my inbox an hour later. IP confirmation, a brief informal. Attendees, V. Wolf, A. Cole, 1 HR witness. A small room, a short list, a friendly noun doing terrible work, as always. I read it twice, and then I did not panic, and then I went to see Kate. She was at her desk in the glass room, and she wasn't alone. There was a man beside her in a good suit I didn't recognize, the kind of suit that bills by the syllable. Company counsel. The board's lawyer brought in as the audit grew teeth. Adam, Kate said, this is the company's legal counsel. He's joining the IP portion. You received an invitation. I did. I sat down. Small meeting, informal. She wants me to sign an assignment of the methodology to the company. The lawyer's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. And will you? That depends, I said, on what you already know. I reached into my bag and took out a single document. Old, the folds worn soft from years of being kept and never used. I set it on the desk and turned it to face them, the way I'd turned 2 screens to face Kate a month ago. I've learned that the strongest thing you can do with proof is simply put it where someone can read it, and then be quiet. That's the patent, I said. The registration for the core methodology. The thing the entire roadmap is built on. The lawyer leaned in. He read the front page. Then he read the one line that mattered, the line with the name and the date, and I watched a very expensive, very controlled man forget to keep his face still. The patent was registered to me. Personally, by name. Dated 3 years before Vanessa ever signed her contract. Is this current? The lawyer asked. Not lapsed, not superseded? Maintained every year, I said. On time, I keep things. And there's no assignment on file. Nothing the company had you sign when you started. They never asked. I built it before they thought to. By the time anyone realized the product was the methodology was already mine, and nobody wanted to open the question. I let that sit. I didn't hide it. I just never volunteered to fix a problem that protected me. He didn't say anything for a moment. Neither did Kate. Nobody explained the law to anybody, because everybody in that room already understood it, and the understanding was the loudest thing in the building. The company didn't own the methodology. It had been licensing the work of a man it had just tried to optimize off the floor and write a failing review for. And the CEO was, at that moment, drafting a document to make a man sign away rights that were already, legally, indisputably his. You kept this, the lawyer finally said, half to himself. For 3 years. Quietly. Did you keep it accidentally? Kate asked. Or intentionally? It was the first sentence she'd ever said to me without a question mark hiding somewhere in her tone. A real question, asked of a person she'd decided was a person. I considered telling her I'd count that as progress, but some jokes are just for me. Intentionally, I said. I keep everything, I told you. It's the only talent I have. People kept taking things from me, ever since I was a kid. I got into the habit of making copies that couldn't be taken. It's a remarkably useful one, the lawyer said faintly. Kate looked at the date, then at the meeting invite still open on my phone, then at me. Something settled in her face, the click of a professional realizing the case had just changed shape entirely. This changes the board format, she said. Completely. She thinks she's calling a small meeting to take something from you. She's actually calling a small meeting to attempt, on the record, in front of a witness, to coerce a man into surrendering property she does not own and knows the board is auditing. She set the patent down gently. Do you understand what she's about to walk into? I think she's about to do the thing she always does, I said. Put me in a small room, lower my confidence, and offer to hold the cage while I climb in. It's worked her whole life. She has no other move. She's never needed one. My hand drifted to my breast pocket, where another, older set of papers had lived for 18 years. Medical records, a complaint, the proof of a broken arm and who broke it. I didn't take them out. They weren't for this room. But I touched them, the way you touch a door you're not ready to open yet, just to know it's still there. The lawyer started gathering his things. I'll need a copy of this, and I'll be attending that informal meeting personally. No, I said. He stopped. Let it stay small. Her, me, one witness, exactly like she asked. If a lawyer's in the room, she'll smell it and she'll cancel, and we'll be back to her word against mine in a building she controls. I looked at Kate. She only ever overplays when she thinks she's winning. Give her the small room. Let her feel safe. Let her reach for it. There's a risk, the lawyer said. If the meeting is truly unsupervised and she does coerce you, and you sign under pressure, we're in a much weaker position. You'd be betting your only real asset on staying calm in a small room with the person who— He stopped, choosing the word. With a difficult person. I won't sign anything, I said. You can't know that. People fold. That's why she likes small rooms. I know, I said. I've been in small rooms with her before. The first one was a long time ago and I was much smaller, and I still didn't give her what she wanted. I kept my voice level. She spent 18 years certain that room broke me. Let her find out on the record, with a witness, exactly how wrong she is. The lawyer studied me, then looked at Kate, who gave him the smallest nod, vouching for a man she'd spent a month trying to disprove. Record it, he said finally. Whatever device you have. If she says anything coercive, anything personal, we want it. I always record, I said, and she always says something. She can't help it. The moment she feels safe, she tells you exactly who she is. She always has. Kate held my eyes for a moment. Then slowly she nodded, because she understood the thing the whole audit had been waiting for. You don't have to push her. You just have to stop holding her up and let her step exactly where she's already decided to step. I looked down at the invite one more time. The room. The time. The small, friendly, informal trap she'd built for me, not knowing she'd built it on a floor that belonged to me the whole time. Good, I said quietly. Right there. Right. The same kind of small room she had always loved. This time, though, I'd pick the witnesses too. The meeting was set for 3 o'clock. I got there at 10:02 because I wanted to be early and because I wanted Dennis to have his chance to find me first. He always did. He was waiting in the corridor outside the boardroom, holding 2 coffees. There's a kind of man who thinks any wound can be closed with the right small gesture if he just times it well enough. Dennis was that kind of man. Of course he was. 2 coffees. The peace offering. The oldest move in his small book. The one he'd tried on the day he helped exile me. The one he reached for whenever the guilt got loud enough to need drowning in caffeine. Adam, he said. Hey, I got you one. Black, 2 sugars, right? You still take it like that? I still take it like that. He'd remembered. 18 years from now, he'll remember how I take my coffee, and not one single thing about why that won't be enough. Listen, he said fast before I could speak. Before you go in there, I need you to know I didn't want any of this. Whatever happens in that room, you have to believe me, I never wanted it to go this way. I was stuck. You don't know what she's like, the way I know exactly what she's like, I said. Then you know I didn't have a choice. I was trying to survive her, same as you. We're on the same side, really, when you think about it. We always were. He held out the cup, his hand not quite steady. Take the coffee, please. Just take the coffee. He brought the ritual reconciliation coffee. And the saddest part, the part I almost felt sorry for, was that he didn't know it didn't matter anymore. He thought there was still something to bargain for. He didn't know I'd already won 5 minutes ago in a quiet room with a patent and a date on it. I looked at the cup. Black, 2 sugars. The exact right coffee, offered too late by a man who'd had 30 seconds and a green button and chose himself. I'm not going to forgive you, Dennis, I said. Not cruel, just true. You want me to take the coffee so you can feel like we're okay. We're not okay. You don't get to feel okay. That's not me being harsh. That's just the bill. Adam, you could have called me. Last week in the hallway, outside her door. I watched his face go white, because he hadn't known I knew. And now he understood that somehow, some way, I always know. You had my number open. You stood there. And you put the phone down. He couldn't answer. There's no answer to the call you didn't make. How? He started. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that there was one moment in all of this where you could have been my friend instead of her tool, and it cost nothing, and you still couldn't do it. I shrugged. You weren't even choosing her over me by then. You were choosing yourself over both of us. That's the part you'll have to live with. Not that you picked her. That when it came down to it, you didn't pick anyone but you. I was going to tell you, he said very quietly. I swear I was going to. Going to isn't a thing, Dennis. It's the place people store the decency they never spent. I wasn't angry saying it. That was what undid him, I think. If I'd shouted, he could have made me the villain. But I just sounded tired, and a little sad and completely done. I understand, I said. I do. You were scared, and you were stuck, and every step felt reasonable. I'm not even angry. But understanding why a man did it isn't the same as forgiving him for it, and I'd be insulting both of us if I pretended it was. For what it's worth, I said, she's going to do to you what she did to me. Maybe not today. But you're a loose end now, and she ties those. You know that. You've watched her do it. The only difference is I kept records, and you kept a drawer full of reasons to be afraid. His eyes flickered, and I knew I'd guessed right about the drawer, even if I'd never seen it. Men like Dennis always keep the evidence. They just keep it for the wrong reason, to protect themselves, never to do the right thing while it still counts. I didn't take the coffee. I stepped around it, around him, and put my hand on the boardroom door. Keep it, I said. You look like you need it more than I do. And I went in, and left him in the corridor holding 2 cups and no one to give the second one to. He set it down on the window ledge, untouched, still steaming. The same picture as the day he exiled me, only this time it was his offering going cold instead of mine. The circle closing. Inside, the boardroom was almost empty. It was the same room as my first Monday. I noticed that. She'd chosen it on purpose, I think. Some instinct to take me back to the scene of her first win, to remind us both who'd stood where. People like her love a callback. They just never check who's writing the ending. That first day, the room had been packed, 40 people, her standing at the head with all the power in the building, me handing over a phone. Now the chairs were empty, the light was flatter, and the power had quietly changed hands without her noticing, the way it always does, in documents and dates while the loud people are still talking. 3 chairs that mattered. Vanessa at the head, where she'd stood that first morning. Kate to the side, laptop open, calm as a Tuesday. And me, walking in not as a man being summoned, but as a man arriving exactly on time to something he'd arranged. Vanessa's smile flickered when she saw Kate. Just for a second. She'd booked a small room. She had not booked an auditor. I don't recall inviting the auditor, she said. I sit in on any meeting touching the audit scope, Kate said, not looking up from her laptop. Intellectual property is in scope. This is an IP meeting. I'm required to be present and to record it. You may continue. A muscle moved in Vanessa's jaw. But she'd come too far to stop, and stopping wasn't in her anyway. People like her don't have a reverse gear. They only know how to press harder. I had counted on exactly that. It is the single most reliable thing about her. More reliable than any document I'd ever kept. Fine, she said, and turned the full warmth of herself on me. The gentle voice. The one I'd been hearing since I was 12. Adam, sit. This is simple. There's a document. It confirms that your work belongs to the company, where it's always belonged. You sign it, and we put all this unpleasantness behind us. You go back to being a valued part of the team. She slid a single page across the table. 1 paragraph. A pen on top of it, laid at an angle, like a gift. I didn't sit. I didn't reach for the pen. I just looked at her. It's been a hard few weeks, she went on, filling the quiet because she always had to fill it. I understand that. Change unsettles you. But this is me offering you a way back. I'm being generous, Adam, More generous than you deserve, frankly, after the games you've been playing with this audit. A thread of steel through the honey. Sign, and it all goes away. The review, the remote arrangement, all of it. I can be very kind to people who remember their place. Remember their place? I let the phrase hang there. I'd spent 18 years being told my place. I knew the whole speech by heart. I could have prompted her if she forgot a line. And if I don't sign, I said. Here's the thing I knew, the thing the whole month had been building toward. She could not stand to be looked at like that and not answer it. Silence to Vanessa was a vacuum, and she had spent her entire life rushing in to fill the space around me with rules. I just had to be quiet, and wait, and let her do what she always did. Don't look at me like that, she said. The first crack. Don't you dare go quiet on me. You always did that. You just go still and let me be the one who… She stopped herself, caught it, tried for the calm executive again. Sign the document, Adam. I didn't sign the document. I didn't say a word. I just held her gaze, the way I never could when I was 12, and let the quiet press on her like a thumb. It worked the way it always works on people who need control. The quiet didn't calm her. It enraged her. Every second I didn't fill was a second she had to, and she had only ever had one tool for filling it. If you don't sign, she said, and her voice dropped into something lower, more honest, the warmth curdling into the real thing underneath. Then I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I'll see to it personally. I have the relationships, a few quiet calls, and every door in this city closes. No firm will touch you. You'll have your little patent and nothing to use it on. You'll be exactly what you were before. Nothing. A nobody at a wall. She leaned forward. I can erase you, Adam. I've done it before. Sign the paper, or I'll spend the rest of my career making certain you regret it. That's not a threat. That's a promise from someone who keeps them. And then she stopped. The silence that came down was not my silence anymore. It was hers. The silence of a person who has just heard the echo of her own voice and understood, a half-second too late, exactly what she said and exactly where she said it. Her eyes went to Kate's laptop. The little recording light, the cursor blinking at the end of a transcript that had taken down every word. I still hadn't said anything. I hadn't needed to. She'd brought me to a small room to take the last thing I had, and instead she'd done the exact opposite. She'd stood in front of an auditor and a recording device and threatened to destroy a man's livelihood to seize property she knew the board was auditing, property that was legally his. She'd done it herself. I never touched the lever. I just opened the door and let her walk through it. That's an interesting position, Kate said into the silence, mild as ever. She turned a printed page face up on the table and slid it toward the center, where all three of us could see it. Because it lines up with something you've said before. Repeatedly. Vanessa looked down at the page. It was her own words, quoted, dated, 3 times over. I have nothing to hide. The boardroom, weeks ago. The recruitment of Dennis. The audit session. You've said that to me, to the board, and to your own staff, Kate went on, and every time you said it, you were hiding the same thing. So let me make sure the record is precise. She set one more sheet beside the first. A single line was highlighted. At the top, a number. What you just described, signing under threat to your career, has a name. Article 179. Compulsion to complete a transaction under threat. She didn't read the law. She didn't have to. She just let the number sit there on the table between us, the way I'd taught her, the way you let proof do its own talking. You should also know, Kate continued in the same flat, unhurried voice, that the transaction you were compelling concerns intellectual property registered to Mr. Cole personally, 3 years before your contract. The company doesn't hold an assignment. So in addition to the threat we just recorded, you attempted to coerce a man into transferring property he owns, and the company does not. I've already briefed the board's counsel. They're reviewing the recording from the device that's been running since you started speaking. She closed her laptop with a soft click. This stopped being an HR matter several sentences ago. Vanessa's voice came out wrong, thin. She tried again. This is a private meeting. You scheduled it as an IP confirmation in scope of an active audit, Kate said. There is no private version of this meeting. There never was. You invited the record into the room yourself. You always do. That's the thing nobody warns people like you about. You're so used to every room belonging to you that you forget rooms can be rented out from under you, quietly, by someone patient enough to wait for the lease to turn. I watched Vanessa's face then. I'd waited 18 years for it. And I'll be honest, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was something quieter and stranger. For the first time since she'd walked into my life behind a gym wall, the gentle mask was simply gone, and there was nothing underneath it. No cruelty, no control. Just a person looking at a piece of paper with her own voice on it, and finally completely unable to smile. She'd built her whole life on one equation. Fear is control, control is safety, the wall keeps the boy. And the equation had just returned. In a quiet room, in front of a witness she couldn't fire. On a recording she couldn't delete, the one answer it had never given her before. She wasn't safe. She'd never been safe. She'd just never been the one against the wall. "Turn it off," she said to Kate. Quiet, almost pleading, which was a sound I'd never heard her make. "Whatever you have. Delete it. We can come to an arrangement. Everyone here is reasonable." "I don't make arrangements," Kate said. "I make records. That's the whole job. You knew that when you hired the audit." She tilted her head. "You did hire the audit, by the way. It was your initiative. The board minutes are very clear. You brought me in to look strong. I just looked." That was the last turn of it, and it was Vanessa's own hand on the wheel. She'd called the audit herself, weeks ago, to project control, to look like the reformer who feared nothing. She'd built the very thing that was now reading her rights. Every brick of the trap had her fingerprints on it, because she'd laid them, one confident sentence at a time. Nobody raised their voice. I never raised mine. That was the part she'd have hated most, if she could still feel anything as small as pride. There was no shouting, no speech, no slap. There was a number on a page and the sound of a recording still running. It struck me watching her that this was the exact thing she'd done to me my whole life, only inverted. She'd always won quietly, gently, in small rooms, with a soft voice and no witnesses. Now she was losing the same way. Quietly, gently, in a small room. The only difference was the witnesses, and the witnesses had been her idea. Vanessa set down the pen she'd offered me. Her hand wasn't quite steady now. She looked at the document she'd drafted, the small room she'd chosen, the trap she'd built and walked into with her eyes open, and something in her understood that there was no gentle sentence left that could fix it. For once, there was no softer, worse thing to say. Then, slowly, without a word, Vanessa stood up. Vanessa stood up, and for a moment nobody moved. Outside the glass wall of the boardroom, the corridor had begun to fill. Word travels fast in a building, faster than any audit. 2 board directors were already there, coats still on, called in from wherever emergencies find men like them. A third was coming off the lift. Kate had made one quiet call, and the people who actually owned the company had come to see for themselves. Vanessa looked at them through the glass. Then she looked at me. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say, and saying it would only have given her something to push against. I'd learned that a long time ago, against a wall, when staying silent was the only power a small boy had. The difference was that now the silence was a choice, and it was mine, and it was winning. She could have stayed. She could have fought it, called her own lawyer, demanded the recording be struck, made the director sit through a war. A guiltless person would have. A guiltless person plants their feet and says, "Check everything. I have nothing to hide." She'd said those exact words a dozen times. And now, given the one moment where they would have meant something, she did the opposite. She reached down, picked up her bag, and gathered the unsigned document and her pen with hands that had finally stopped pretending to be steady. "Vanessa," one of the directors said as she came out, not unkindly. "We should talk. Sit down." "There's nothing to discuss," she said. Quiet. Even the collapse came out in that gentle voice. "I'm leaving. If you walk out before the board convenes, you understand how that looks." "I understand exactly how it looks," she said. And that was the thing. She did. She understood that leaving was a confession, that a CEO who walks out before the vote has already counted the vote. She wasn't fleeing because she was confused. She was fleeing because, for the first time in her life, she was in a room where being looked at closely was dangerous, and she could not bear to be seen. So she walked. Down the corridor, past the people she'd ruled through fear, her heels striking the floor, in that even rhythm I'd heard on my first Monday. The sound that had once made a whole department sit straighter. Nobody sat straighter now. They just watched her go. The heavy doors at the end of the floor opened, and then they closed behind her, slow and final, and that was all. No screaming, no last threat, no grand exit line. Just a woman leaving a building that no longer belonged to her, swallowed by a closing door. The floor had gone still to watch. 40-some people, the same ones who'd sat frozen while she took my phone, the same ones who'd raised 23 hands. They didn't cheer. It wasn't that kind of moment. They just watched the doors close, and then slowly the room let out a breath it had been holding for a month, maybe longer. Diane from accounts caught my eye across the floor. She didn't smile exactly. She just nodded once, the way you nod at the end of something. The same nod she'd given me the day I carried my box out, except that day it had meant good luck. And today, it meant you were right. I'll take the second one. It's rarer. Greg from IT was leaning in a doorway, arms crossed, and when he saw me looking, he mouthed 2 words. 10-foot screen. Even now, the man would put it on my gravestone. Nobody had to be told what had happened. That's the thing about a culture of fear. The second the source of it walks out the door, everyone understands the new weather instantly. You could feel the building exhale around me, floor by floor, as the news moved through it without anyone saying a word. My hand drifted to my breast pocket. The old papers were still there. 18 years of them. The medical record of a broken arm. The complaint nobody acted on. The proof of who she'd always been. Carried so long the folds had gone soft as cloth. I'd thought, for so many years, that someday I'd get to put them on a table in front of her and make her look. That the ending would be me holding up the wound and finally being believed. I left them in my pocket. I didn't need them. That was the strange, quiet gift of it. The childhood proof was for a fight I'd already stopped having. She hadn't been brought down by what she did to a boy at a wall. She'd been brought down by what she couldn't stop doing to grown adults in a building with a recording device. The wound stayed mine. Private. A closed thing. I didn't have to bleed in public to win. I just had to keep better records than she did, and outlast the part of myself that still wanted her to admit it. Some doors you don't open. Not because you can't, because you finally don't need to. The win I'd wanted at 12 was an apology. The win I got at 30 was that I no longer required one. That's the better prize. It just takes 18 years to understand why. Kate came to stand beside me. She didn't congratulate me. She never would. She just held a thick folder the whole month of it, every timestamp and testimony and signed coerced page, and she walked it over to the senior director and put it in his hands. It's all there, she said. Dated, sourced, witnessed. The recording's the last file. You'll want counsel before you listen, but you'll want to listen. She paused. For what it's worth, none of this needed me. He documented the entire thing himself before I ever arrived. I just confirmed it was real. That's unusual, the director said. He's unusual, Kate said. I spent a month trying to prove he'd manufactured it. I couldn't. Everything he gave me was true, and dated, and exactly where he said it would be. I don't say that about people. I'm saying it about him. It was, I realized, the closest thing to a compliment Kate had in her whole vocabulary. I decided to treasure it quietly, the way you treasure rare weather. Praise from a person who is physically incapable of flattery is the only praise worth keeping. Everything else is just somebody managing you. The director glanced at me over the top of the folder. It was a look I hadn't gotten in this building in a long time. Maybe ever. Not pity, not suspicion. The plain level respect one professional gives another.